glasses for gin and tonics and things like that back in the old days. I remember those.
Yes, please. Watermelon. You see, we
Yeah,
go
yeah.
from watermelon.
I was just thinking
Yeah,
with
there's.
schnapps, it's
I
got to be
worked with a
served cold,
director.
otherwise it boils off.
I worked with a director that actually, instead of watermelon cantaloupe, actually gave every extra script.
Wow, with
You
a
know, and
name.
I will admit,
Man
hold on a
one,
second.
man two, woman one, woman two. Feedback.
Was this director a fan of micromanagement?
It it was better. I will admit.
Or maybe he
It
was a
it
skilled
actually
leader.
you can actually tell. Like
Yeah.
we when
Yeah.
the extras have something to do, they
Oh, yeah.
when they
Scare
have
it
it
away.
like we laughed. We were watching Maleficent with my kids, and there's this one extra that she goes like she claps like once, and then she just goes like this. so now when we want to clap, we go like this to each other because it's right at the very end when they win. If you look at this woman in the background just going like this. She like clapped once, and I guess she decided she was done with clapping. They probably had done like 8 takes, and decided that was enough. Anyway, so hey everybody, welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can join the conversation by coming to the Zoom link that's down below. If you're here as an attendee, and you're wondering how all these people got into the panelists, they were here early. They had good internet, they had good video, they had good audio, and they thought that they could contribute something to the conversation. They could add and move the ball down the field, and so that's what they're here for. What you're here for as an attendee. There's no freeloading here. You need to ask questions. You drive the conversation. You are the producers for the show. So ask questions. So you'll see a link in the chat in Zoom to Makana, and then in Makana, you can ask questions and vote on those questions. It's important because that orders what we tend to talk a little bit longer about the stuff at the top. By the time we get to the bottom of the hour, it's a little more. It's a little faster. So so ask early and vote often. And for the next, I'm in some heavy production right now. So for the next 3 days, it's going to be 2 hours of conversation, or when you stop asking questions. So that'll be when we close it up, and so that'll be up to you. Go ahead, Schy.
I don't see YouTube in Makana yet.
Oh, it's probably a back end issue. Anyway, so that is that's the announcement. So I'm working a lot of hours right now, so I appreciate all the people that are here in the panel holding the space. So as an attendee, your job to hold the space is to be asking questions, interacting, keeping the space nice and warm while I'm out for a little bit. And as the panelists, thank you so much for being here and discussing these issues. And I will see you again probably tomorrow morning. I kind of open it up at 6, talk to everybody for a couple minutes, and then I go back to my thing. And I'll be doing that the rest of the week. Just an announcement: Thursday is Dolby Summit. If you saw the discussion of Dolby Vision from the Apple announcement. It's really important right now if you're a media producer to understand HDR. So think of the Dolby Summit as the first class for our group on getting our head around high dynamic range and surround sound. I definitely plan to do a lot more in the next couple months with all of you. So I would highly recommend carving out as much of the time as you have Thursday morning to watch that. And you'll see a question system that looks very much like ours, a little different. So anyway, it'd be good for you to be there so that I've got some ringers asking quick questions, understand how it works, and it'd be good. It would be be useful for me too. So anyway, so I hope that we see some of you at the Dolby Summit. I think it's going to be great. Anyway, I'm going to bug out and go back to work, but thanks everybody. And we'll see you tomorrow morning.
Thank you, Alex. So it is that time of the day. The show is officially underway now. I assume what Alex usually talks to everybody about, for those who might be coming in, and let me look down at the numbers. Yeah, we got 100+ people here. Go ahead, Jeffrey. Oh, I've got to move it along, don't I?
So no, but I want to, before we get into the questions, Alex just reminded me. I was watching the news today, and it was really interesting because on the news, what they're doing is they're highlighting local classes and their Zoom calls. And what was interesting is this class, they started talking, and they said, welcome, and everybody raised their hands and did this. And I gotta wonder, did this come from office hours, or did they? Well, I mean, it's ASL, so they could have done it themselves. But it was interesting to see how that happened, and how it could have been possibly a thing that we brought in. So
Well, we've heard from a number of people that people have talked about office hours as being a really good Zoom webcast that people are talking about out there. So maybe there's every reason to believe that maybe some of the things that we've learned to do because they work are spreading out there. That would be great. I don't think I have to do too much of the opening stuff. I think everybody knows about that, and I don't think I'm going to go through any of the opening stuff. We all know about that. The Discord link, did it all get taken care of for this morning? For those of you who are watching who don't know, we have an ongoing Discord every day. In order to get into the Discord, you really have to be here at the office hours kind of pre-show, because the Discord link's normally sent out at about 6:40 in the morning, and it only lasts until we start our mic checks in the morning. But if you'd like to join that community, there's probably, 700-800 folks now that are on 24/7, getting these same kinds of questions that we handle here on office hours dealt with in a text format. So you are encouraged to join in the Discord, but you have to be here when the Discord link is sent out. And that, as I said, usually happens about 6:40 every morning. And then after that, it shuts down about the time the show starts on YouTube. So at right at 7 o'clock. And so that's how that works. I think that's really all I probably have to talk to about, other than Alex's standard thing, which is that the show is driven by the attendees. We have a decent set of questions in today already, but if you've never asked a question, it's easy. The chat link at the bottom of your Zoom screen will actually not take you into our chat, but it does show a link to the Mokana chat. Go there, and then you will see places to add your questions, and more importantly, to vote questions up and down, because as Alex is always talking to us, it is that voting process that drives how quickly we get to the questions, because the ones with the most votes get talked about earlier, and how long we spend on each question. So voting is your responsibility as an attendee here today, and we encourage you to do a lot of that and ask questions. So the first question comes from the panelist's own TJ Asher, and it's a plant, because we wanted to talk to some of our members from the panel who have actually been out doing production. And TJ wanted to start with Doug, and Doug discussed the wedding he organized over the weekend. So Doug, let's let you talk a little bit about what you did, and then how it worked.
Right. So I actually had two productions this weekend. Friday night was a football game that we streamed, and then Saturday was my stepdaughter's wedding. The original plan was not to stream the wedding, but Thursday evening late, several key family members came down with COVID, and it was my daughter was like in tears, like, can we stream this so that people can be part of the event? Which obviously the answer was yes. So Saturday we streamed the event, but we ran into the typical problems. The venue was actually her dad's house, and we had there were tons of tents, so we ran into internet problems, power problems, but throughout the day, I got those all solved, and the event itself went off great. And so everybody was happy. It's on YouTube on our Never Ends Productions channel, if anybody wants to go see. I know that John Preto actually saw it live, was giving me some live feedback. It was really a fun event, and it was kind of crazy because I flew my drone because it was a great little sunset, and the venue, the wedding was at 5:30, and it was about 4 o'clock. I flew the drone for about 4 minutes, just get some shots of the thing, and then during the actual ceremony, which the ceremony only lasted about 30 minutes, I was thinking to myself, how am I going to end this show? Thinking as a director. I'm like, you know what? I have this footage. So it was on my iPhone. So I literally emailed myself the file. Then I took a thumb drive, transferred it over to my TriCaster, got it in to the TriCaster for the end of the show, and that's how I ended it with some music playing and the drone shot, and everybody loved the drone shot. So that was a last minute call on my end, but yeah, everything was good. But I'll wait for the Friday stuff, because the Friday was a different didn't go so smooth.
Okay, first and foremost, our thoughts to your family, and I hope they have a very light and very quick and 100% recovery. John Preto.
Couple comments from the cheap seat. My bird's going crazy, guys. Sorry. The officiant's the best officiant I've ever seen at a wedding. The guy was like on a comedy routine. His timing was impeccable. When everybody stood up, your camera angle, like you couldn't see through the people. That was the only problem. When they were all sitting down, it was spectacular. The audio sounded great, video looked great. And the drone shot was amazing because the trees are all changing colors. So there's a red one and some yellow ones. It was fun. I'm doing a wedding next week, and I've done lots and lots of weddings.
That's nice. When I did a lot of speaker work with somebody at a podium in front, and I eventually moved to a spider pod to get up to try to get rid of that audience in front of the camera dynamic. And then after that even failed me a couple of times, I had one stand with me always that went to 7 feet that I could put a lightweight camera, or 17 feet that I could put a lightweight camera up really, really tall if I needed to get over some sort of blockage like that. So these are things you just learn as you go along. Anybody else have any comments on this? So the other group that had some work to this weekend was Schy. So Schy, do you want to pop in and talk about the production challenges you faced and how you solved them?
Goodness. And Bruce is in the house. Bruce, okay, so we chose, and Rachel and our Beauty Bubble from StreamYard has been such a huge support. She introduced me to, Bruce introduced himself about a week ago. And Jeffrey, I really do need you to put a timer on me, because otherwise, yeah, whatever.
I'll jump in if you go too far.
I'm not.
Time. This is 15 seconds. You're off. You're cut.
Beep. Okay, that's it. And wait a minute, who's at it? Who's controlling the show? Okay, anyway, so Bruce jumped in a week off launch.
You just cut out. You muted for a second.
Jeffrey's messing with me.
I'm controlling the show. Yes.
Oh,
I'm kidding. Continue.
All right, let's keep the show rolling. We do have an audience out there. Come on.
That's what Bruce did he controlled the show from Chicago. I'm in Bellevue, Washington with Madeline Smithburg doing the main chef, but she is also being taught how to do lasagna roll-ups by the chef in Studio City. And we had people from around the world. We had a audience engagement officer who was grabbing the interactions. The fail was each iPhone or each phone device was a separate. So we had up to 9 video devices coming into StreamYard that we could choose from. But unfortunately, we used one of them as the audio connection, but it was a bad low angle. So as I tried to remove it, I just killed my audio from Studio City. And so that was a how to learn how to not do something.
I think it was a very ambitious project, because we had 5 cameras from each or 4 to 5 cameras from each location. And most times when people are doing live, especially like a cooking show, it's like 1, maybe 2 cameras.
But yeah, that was also what gave it a dynamic. And that's why I posted the link it almost had a video game concept. It wasn't quite a Zoom meeting. It wasn't quite a production, but it was comedy and was fun. And the Today Show decided to use that recipe for what they want to be taught on November 3rd when Madeline's on the Today Show. So
that's nice. You had success in that area. That's great.
We had
a lot of times, actually, what we do, we divided our responsibilities, because as opposed to having Schy doing all the switching and then doing all the lower thirds and then bringing up all the comments, he was in charge primarily of the cameras, and I was taking over the responsibility of bringing up the comments and lower thirds during the show. So we brought up the recipe during the appropriate times, so he can concentrate on the camera work and I can concentrate on the auxiliary stuff.
So
And
Bruce, you
a lot of
essentially
times
acted as
with-
the audience engagement officer, trying to make sure that the comments and the
No,
rest
we
of that
had-
got into the
we
show.
had-
there's a
we
third person who was
Oh,
audio
there was a
engagement.
third. Okay. Can you talk about their role? Because I don't think a lot of people have gone down that path yet, and it's pretty important.
Well, again, the show is what the people, we're doing it for you and not for ourselves. And so we want the engagement, the opportunity. And I created the title audience engagement officer because we needed somebody out there interacting in the live moment to say, no, you are what, and again, I'm stealing the ideas from office hours. The audience is why we're here. Otherwise, we could just do this internal conference concept. But no, we're doing a show. It's, and B, it's all about comedy and entertainment, but it's comedy based on food. So how can we have fun in food with you and teach you how to do a thing?
So in general, if you were going to be sitting down talking to somebody about doing this job as audience engagement officer, what would you describe the job to be? What are the functional steps they would need to take?
Well, hopefully we did a
Bruce?
pretty good sampling of that in the show. So go take a look at Marisa. She came in. She was well, we stole again from Madeline from the Comedy Central. We stole the reporter in the field. This is what's happening. And so she was saying we had a run of show. And so we would find that the low points when we were cooking something that we needed to bring some energy, we said, let's engage the audience. And hey, this person said this. And she would come in and be the reporter in the field.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. I guess that takes care of it. Was there anything else on my list of people who had done something live this weekend? Courtney wanted to chat. Yeah, Courtney.
I just wanted to ask Bruce what he was using for his lower thirds and graphics, on-screen graphics.
It's actually built into the program of StreamYard. So StreamYard has an area called comments, another area called banners, and you can bring those in. It's because it's built into the program.
And that
And
leads
again-
us nicely. Oh, unless there more comment?
Yeah, a little bit
this
more.
is-
And then also I brought in some Photoshop with alpha channels, so I can bring those into a certain portion. So I was able to copy the actual recipe from the website, cut that into a Photoshop, add it to alpha, bring it as a PNG, and then it just kind of overlaid on top of the images.
It was very bizarre to team TD. And so Bruce and I had to talk that through beforehand so that we didn't step on each other. There were a couple of times when we overlaid and overlapped and some visuals didn't work because I was doing something and then a graphic would show over the face of somebody, but we learned quickly. But that we could even do it was pretty amazing. And again, I want to shout out to Beauty Bubble and her continuing support on the whole StreamYard front. She's very supportive.
Yeah, it's amazing.
No,
Pretty
and
amazing
also-
when you think about it. A global multi-camera switch show, distributed out from people's home computers is a pretty amazing concept.
To up to what, 32 different locations. We just sent it to Facebook and YouTube, but I think you can go up to like
8 with
Okay.
the Pro Pack.
Wow, that's amazing. Guy?
Yeah, I just want to say congrats for pulling it off. I mean, that was, I watched the whole thing. I mean, I was like, wow, you guys are on a tightrope. Like, I wouldn't have been that ambitious, but it was cool to see you push forward and actually pull it off. So hats off to you guys. I
Well-
mean, you learned some stuff, but that's part of it, right? We're all pushing forward and trying to
well,
learn
and
new
that's where
things in this
failing
environment.
up. And the familial concept is we met Marisa because of Guy Cochran. And so we just keep finding people that want to have fun and move forward and fail up. So awesome.
Jeffrey had his hand up.
Oh, Guy, before you go on to the next question, Guy actually has a question saying that he had a production issue today or on Sunday. What was that?
Okay, let me pop into that one. So Guy just said, can I share my near streaming disaster at church? Of course.
Yeah, let me
Dive
give
into
you
it.
kind of the rundown here of what the setup is, because it's basically a pretty inexpensive setup. Well, to me, I don't think that this is a whole lot of money for a church to throw at something. It's basically a PTZ camera, a controller, and an encoder / kind of monitor. That's the YOLO Live box. So what happened was I walked in and this thing was dead. Like there was the controller wasn't lighting up. Normally it's already on and lit up. So I checked the power, and I happened to have in my little bag of tricks, I brought one of these little things, and the light didn't come on. So I'm like, oh man, we have no power. 30 minutes to show, no power. I happen to have in my Jeep, um, because of office hours, I was bringing in a big old monster power backup, and I pulled it out of my office. And so I happen to have this thing fully charged, and it weighs like 85 pounds. I mean, it's a beast. So pulled that in and was able to do the show. But once we lit up, the controller needed a pin. So I had to go find the pin online through the manual to get to choose the shot. Otherwise, it was stuck on one wall. And then when we finally did get up, the internet was out because it was on the same power breaker. So we used a hotspot. So we had like multiple things that just, it's that thing of if it can go wrong, it will. So have backups. So we had a backup. I actually had a backup encoder, which is this little guy right here. So this is kind of what it looks like. It's basically Ethernet and 2 HDMIs. So you can see what you're doing on the screen and you can cut between the two. And it's just sending RTMP out. So it's a cool little box for $1,000. Oh yeah, and then the audio is the house sound, and it just comes in through mini plug via line in. But I'm pretty impressed with this. I wouldn't have recommended it for this gig, but it was there when I got there. So it's one of those things where they picked a bunch of things that I wouldn't have picked, but they all work except for when there's no power. So be ready with some kind of power backup, or know where the breaker is just in case, because we found the breaker after the show. But during the show, when you're that close in a huge building, you're like, where's the power breaker? And we flipped all the ones. It was in C, so there was 3 breaker boxes. So
Oh man,
crazy time.
When things go wrong in church, a string of expletives is not the way to go.
Oh, sure. Now,
Yeah, there was
now
no
you tell me,
expletives.
Courtney. Now you tell me. Thanks.
You didn't say enough Hail Mary, guy.
Yeah.
So since Courtney was in on that one, he's actually got the next comment specifically. James Babbitt here in San Diego says, could Courtney discuss his comment about giving advice to move the cameras so that the eye lines work out? That didn't parse for somebody, and they want you to explain it a little, Courtney.
Yeah, we did a live event, and because of social distancing, there were these, the presenters were all in the same room, but they had to be 6 feet apart. And they had 4 cameras total. They were still cameras, and they were not being operated, so they were all lock-offs. And when I came in there, they had originally ordered 2 teleprompters and 2 prompter operators, one for each close-up camera. And then the woman who was doing another segment, which was like 10 feet away over here, was she had booked her own teleprompter operator. So that would have been 3 teleprompter operators in the same room on the same production. They just didn't really understand how that worked. And so I got there on a setup day, and they had, the 2 lecterns set up 6 feet apart, and an individual camera directly in front of each one of those, and then a wide shot halfway between 2 of them, which was a 2-shot. So in the 2-shot and the wide shot, they're staring off into space because they're looking at their individual prompter monitors, which are directly ahead of them. So on the morning of the shoot, morning of the live show, I thought, if we rearrange this, we went with 1 teleprompter in the middle above the wide shot lens, and then took the other 2 close-ups and moved those cameras right underneath the same teleprompter, since they're all small cameras. And they can look, this one gets a shot of that person, and we just aimed the podiums in toward the center. Now all the eye lines are into all the cameras, and so they're never staring off into space. And that's a problem when you get these people who are used to doing these live banquets and things like that, where the people on the stage are talking to a big audience. Well, now they have to realize that their audience is in one spot rather than across the whole room. It's in that camera lens, and that they're talking to everybody when they're looking at that one camera lens, so they don't have to look around. So it's a whole different line of thinking when you're trying to move what was formerly a live event into a virtual event. But it all came off well, and they raised some money.
Yeah, I think this has been a thing since Desi Arnaz invented the 3-camera sitcom thing. That when you have cameras involved, it's different than a just real piece of reality, and you have to think about it differently. The production requirements, particularly for something that's going to live on some sort of storage for maybe decades. I still think a lot of people spend too much time working about thinking about how to make the live thing work well, and not as much time thinking about how this archival copy that could affect millions more people potentially is going to happen. Schy?
Well, Courtney, and that's why I am listening to the teachers, because they're doing this exercise every day. And Saturday, when they talked about the statistical data of those that are being successful and what successful qualified as, are people showing up, are people continuing to engage, and they're saying the ones that are looking at the virtual audience seem to have higher numbers of engagement. And again, you got to decide, what is your criteria? Is it engagement? Is it participation? And those that are looking, so I shared that with my pastor people at my church, and I said, now that we've opened up people coming back in, you now have a choice of talking to the 90 connections that you've got out there, or you can talk to the 6 that are right in front of you. And so they're trying to do a bit of a hybridization of that, but they're and some do it better than others, because but it is an attitude, and it's a lot of inertia as a speaker of how to engage that human at the end of that eyeball versus this person and this person and this person. So it's a weird yes and. The weirdest part was we then did a pre-recording of the sermon for next week, but I'm cutting it as if it's a live show, but it's going to be up on a screen. So I'm showing the stage that's going to be up on the screen for the audience that's in the, it was so meta. I'm so messed up.
Okay, Stuart had his hand up first, then Jeff. Go ahead, Stuart.
I'm just wondering, for those people who are not used to presenting to the camera, but may already be using a teleprompter, and Courtney can probably be the best person to answer this, how much weight could we hang off the front of a teleprompter, and is it worth putting another monitor there with the grid view displayed on it for those people who are not used to using or not used to presenting to a camera, to actually talk to the people on the grid view they see in front of them?
Courtney, go ahead.
Yeah, and that's a typical setup on most newsroom and live show setups. Is there's a return monitor or an air monitor that's hung directly below, facing the talent, below the camera beam splitter, so that they see their text up here, and then they see their return video there. So if they're talking to someone over a satellite connection or over the internet, they can see the other person directly below the lens. And then if they have scripted dialogue, then they can go to their teleprompter stuff. So that keeps their eye line in the same direction. And that's what we did also on the live event. I put their confidence monitor, which showed their live shot, which was going out on the internet, directly below the lens of the 3 cameras. So they always knew when they were in a pre-taped video part, they could see it. When they came out of the pre-taped video part, they could take their own cues. We didn't have a floor manager or anything. So they just know when they saw their face on the screen there to go to the teleprompter and start talking. So that is essential. And I realize the problem with Schy's church issue is the televised church service has been around forever, and a lot of the life of that comes from preaching to the audience in the church, and when you have to take all those out, it's a whole different dynamic, and a lot of preachers, I don't think, can make that transition easily when they're used to motivating a whole room full of people.
Well, it's also a bizarre dynamic, because that genre of style, just like gospel music, is also an economy stream for capitalism. And so now people are saying, I don't want to do a TV church. And I'm going, I'm just trying to stay and keep connected. We don't have the budget of a Hillsong. We don't have $1 million, infrastructure. So stop trying to be that thing that you aren't sure you want to be, and just be who you are and talk to your people, period.
Jeff Francis, you've had your hand up a
So
long
Sky,
time.
the simple, easy solution is take the few parishioners who are there in the sanctuary and put them in the back directly under the camera or in the balcony right above the camera. And that helps the preacher preach to that camera. That they're not looking down here, they're looking out to the people in the back or the balcony, so they are looking into the camera.
Well, also the heartfelt concept of the humans that are chatting up on YouTube are saying, "Oh, it's almost like a Where's Waldo? Oh, they're there, and they're there, and they're there." And so we're almost kind of thinking about placing the audience in front of the camera so you can see the backs of heads. And I feel like, oh, I'm producing a worship service. I'm horrible. I'm going to go to hell.
Mike Burns has gone too digital on us and how he's making his raised hand an icon. So go, Mike.
Yeah, my hand gets tired when I hold it too long, so I thought that would help, but holding an iPhone actually made it much worse. But the 12, so it's a lighter phone. So anyway, so Courtney, going back to your original question, I was the stage manager in KCAL for a few years back in the day. And so what was the issue? Was it like too many bodies in the room, multiple people running prompters? Was the talent wasn't clear on how to, read off a prompter? What was the issue?
Yeah, I don't think they understood really how prompters work, because they sent me I said, I just need the scripts. And they sent me a separate script for each person that just had their dialogue in it.
Yeah.
So they thought, okay, well, this person's dialogue will be over here on this prompter, and the other person's dialogue will be over here on this prompter, and you'll have to have two operators then to scroll the two things separately. And I went there. I said, that's not really, everybody's script on all the prompters, so that way you know when you're supposed to speak, because when you're going back and forth between two people, if they aren't have the script memorized, they don't know when the other person's finished to do their line. If their line was already up on the prompter, they could be interrupting them, So I finally had to convince them that, no, I need the whole script all together, and then you'll see your name come up, and that's when you speak.
Yeah, I would imagine that would make for some really awkward pauses while they're waiting for the line to come up.
Or if you have their line up there already while the other person is scrolling, you have their next line up there, they could interrupt, they could just hit a pause in their script, and the other person could take that as a cue and start reading theirs. So you got to keep it in one long serial stream so that everybody sees what everybody else is saying, and they just read along silently. And then when their piece comes up, their name comes up, and they read along. And that's how all newscasts are done, of course.
Yeah, that makes sense. Moving on. Next question. Liberty White from Atlanta, Georgia says, if a client decides that they want the raw footage after a shoot, how do you determine what to charge? It was not included in the original scope. P.S. By the way, the files are in Blackmagic RAW format. Stuart and then John Preto. Go ahead, Stuart.
Okay, so this is an opportunity to offset the cost of buying the hard drives that you've got to keep the files in storage for anyway. I don't know if it's the same in the US, but for Australia, under a lot of different things, whether it's tax law and what have you, you've got to keep records of events for something like 7 years. Car companies keep records for the length of the warranty, the same sort of thing, or spare parts. It should be the same for storing client files, whether they're the camera files, the audio files, or just the documentation. You keep it stored safely in at least 3 formats, at least until anything to do with that client is out of date.
Yeah, but that's the storage part of it. I think they want to know about the raw footage. They want the raw footage, and how do you handle that?
Well, you give them a hard drive, and you do it simply by buying the hard drive, including in the cost the same sort of hard drive that you would be storing them on anyway. And you can just give them one of the hard drives. For film stuff, we normally have one with the cinematographer, one with the director, and one with the editor. Once the edit's done, you could always pass that on to the client as the client's archive copy for them to keep in storage.
Yeah, I
That's the
have a
easy way to do
suspicion
it.
that what he's heading toward, though, more is in the photography world. It has been kind of canon that you give people the finished prints, but you never let them have access to the raw files that
Yeah.
their prints were come from. That was part of the business
The
model
whole
for
Yeah, the whole
photographers
point of
for
that
forever.
was to get them to come back to the same photographer to get prints done or new prints done, or like the wedding albums redone if they were lost in a fire, or that. It's a way of making more money later.
Yeah, precisely. But I think because that model came into the, and now suddenly everybody can
Yep.
take a Blackmagic RAW file, at least a lot of people, they will have DaVinci on their system. So they want to have control over that footage. And I think the key to the original question was it says it was not included in the original scope of work. That was the mistake, I believe. You didn't specify who has rights to
It
what.
should be in the contract, but for Liberty White, it's an opportunity to make more money.
Yeah. John Preto?
Just charge
and
a
then
huge
Schy?
amount for it.
I had to learn this lesson the same way that you did, Liberty. Now I always have a line item for post, which includes all the pre-production stuff, the hard drives, and the post work every time.
Jeffrey Powers?
So I have a story on this. A couple of years ago, I had a client that came to me and said that they wanted to do this show, and I said, okay, so here are the two price plans. The first price plan is where I do this for everybody. The first price plan is where I put everything together, and then it goes on to my site. So you pay the least amount of money possible. Then I have the other price plan, which is you take all the information. I'll still put stuff on my site if you want, but everything else goes to you, and that includes the raw files and everything. Now, what happened was other people started getting involved in this thing, as projects usually do. And one person came up and they said, well, where's the raw files? And I said, well, you guys paid for this. We can definitely talk about increasing the price. And he made a big stink about it. Wasn't willing to pay the extra for the raw files. And the long story short is I actually lost a client because of this, because this person had more influence than the other people in the meeting. And so that comes into a very ugly situation where you're fighting over some digital files. I still hold true to my two studies, and I could always point back to that contract that said I offered you this other option and I gave you this price. You didn't counter anything at that point, and so I'm not going to relieve those files for them. But the reality is that that's what some things happen during live production, that you just have to figure out if the client's worth that type of pressure to just give them the files or not give them the files.
Schy?
So to Jeffrey's point, that's often referred to as the intellectual property of the artist. And consequently, that we inherited a lot of that ideal from the photography world, which is a legitimate concept. But I did hear a producer from New Jersey once say, no, you just give a banker's box of tape to that VP, and then it's their responsibility, and then they move on to another company, and then they lose the box, and then they come back and hire you to do a whole new production. So
I will say there's another piece of this that's
another question.
Oh,
I do have another
about this, because I had one more comment to make on this, which
is because I want to do an ISO of the different things. So it might be a different question. Back to you, Bill.
Okay. The comment that I was going to make is that it also has to do with what you're representing as your work. Because I know I've done things where I've spent a lot of time carefully editing a project, and it gets out, and it's the way I see it, and that's my work, and I appreciate it, and you've paid me for it, and that's great, and you have the entire rights to that master. Then suddenly, if they got a hold of the raw file, some knucklehead from who knows gets those, completely re-edits the entire project, hacks it to pieces, it looks terrible, and I've got to go back and say I got to take out all references to that, because I don't want what they've done to my project representing my work, because I don't think it meets my standards. So this is a thorny problem, I think, and I don't think it's ever going to be easily set up. I do know there is more and more pressure to hand over raw files, simply because more and more people have the capacity. When we were editing in 1-inch type C, nobody but television stations had the machines, so it was impossible to go in and touch somebody's work unless you were a serious player in the game or a TV station or something. Boy, have we swapped now, or I can take somebody's Blackmagic RAW files and put them on my phone and re-edit the project. Courtney?
Yeah, that has become a problem because, as a lot of still photographers, wedding photographers have now discovered, that because of the democratization and the lowering of prices of this digital equipment, that anybody can print out a nice full color, 8 by 11, 8.5 by 11 color glossy photo on their $98 inkjet printer at home. And so when it used to be, you want some 8 by 10 glossies, well, they're $25 a piece for the color ones, and you used to be able to make a lot of money on that stuff. It's hard to do that now when everybody is used to doing it at home for themselves, so.
Absolutely. Schy, do you have another comment?
Well, with regards to, with Courtney, I mean, yes, I can take that photo down to Kinko's or Walgreens or whatever and print out a beautiful image, or even, a full poster. And consequently, that's where the photographers used to make their revenue on the back end. My question is, in a for-hire state or a for-hire concept, if you are creating intellectual property or IP that is not yours and you're just brought in as I don't know these verbs. You're just a for-hire?
If you're
work made for hire in Title 17, work made for hire is a specific category in the law about who owns rights to derivative works.
Right, but you have to be operating under a contract for hire that states that. So just make sure that you have a regular boilerplate user agreement. Go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It actually has to be in writing that you are a work for hire. And if it's not in writing, whoever shot it owns it.
Yeah, if you're doing any of this stuff for money, I would highly suggest you go to the Stanford University copyright site. They maintain one there that really breaks down Title 17, which covers all this stuff. It defines things like work made for hire. It also defines fair use, which is a very thorny and sticky thing that I think is more misunderstood than any other aspect of copyright law. And it's not trivialized, but they certainly have made it more user friendly to read through that. And if you're going to be a content creator from now on, to understand how that's in American law, hopefully there will be resources like that for those of you who are around the world who deal with different legal systems. But it'll at least give you a leg up on the official, this is what the law says as it's been interpreted to this point.
And to
Bruce,
Jeffrey,
hang on a second, Schy, hold on. Let's get Bruce in and then I'll come back to you. Go ahead,
Bruce. I still think the person's asking for a price. And the way we kind of price out is start with your hard drive, definitely, but then also looking into your time and then look at the value of that client. And then kind of come up with negotiation. I mean, start out with a high number, maybe like $2,000, $3,000 for everything. And then, so, well, that's not really worth it. And then kind of negotiate, especially on your first time you're doing this. So work with the client, and so you don't lose the client, like Jeffrey stated.
Yeah, I agree with all these things. I will say there's one other thing, because I have turned over a hard drive and then 2 weeks later I get a call back and it's been given to some admin in this organization, and he or she will say, we can't open any of this. We don't have the programs. We don't know what's going on. How do we work with this? And it's more of a rat's nest rather than less than one. So sometimes they think they want the raw media, but they in point of fact don't know what to do with raw media. So that's just a piece. Schy, go ahead.
Well, and that's to Jeffrey's point, is I think now we're also talking about client management and management of expectations. And so to Jeffrey's point, to be right is not successful because you lose a client. And it's like, so Courtney, please.
The other I was just going to say, the other dangerous thing is if they're not used to seeing log C stuff out of a camera, and you give them the footage and they go, God, this stuff looks awful. Why'd we hire this guy? It's all flat and green and it looks terrible.
Exactly.
And you've got to give them, a color corrected version to let them know what it can look like,
But then you're writing a 3-page white paper to turn it over to them, which is way more effort than you ever wanted to put into it. Go ahead, Stuart.
Mind.
Just to what Courtney was saying about log C, Courtney, imagine you're giving them gamma disabled linear footage and watch the reaction. It looks like black on the screen.
Okay. I think we probably pushed this around a lot, but just to say, oh, Jeffrey, do you have one more thing you want to pop in on?
Last thing is one other thing you should put in your contracts, and I definitely do if I'm ever presented with this issue again. Most of the time, it's their social media person that's asking for, I want to take this clip out and I want to throw that on Facebook or Instagram or whatever. That's something I do absolutely for free. I'll just take the clip and send, here it is. I'll even give them the raw version of that one clip. To a point. If they end up like asking for 15 different versions, then we talk price. But if it's like one or two different things, then yeah, send it to them right away. And they always have access to doing stuff with the raw files as long as it just stays with me.
Fair enough. The next question, as soon as I read it to myself, I also thought, this reminds me of Explain the Universe in 25 words or less and why. Esteemed panel, can you explain HDR? Who wants to take a shot? Stuart is going to be brave and try to do this inside an hour.
Firstly, it's a pain in my... Okay, HDR is supposed to be a greater dynamic range compared to, say, cameras that have a standard dynamic range like broadcast. Well, yeah, broadcast camera is a good example. The rough rule is 10 stops and above is HDR. People who own Reds will argue that there is no other HDR camera besides a Red. It's a load of BS. There's also no actual standardized reference for an ISO number yet. It's still in committee. Although Adamus will tell you that their monitors are HDR compliant, but there's no standard to comply to, so you can figure that out. Roughly, it's I believe it was 1,000 nits and above for display is HDR. So if you stretch out your dynamic range of your camera from black being 0 and white being 1,000 nits, there you are. That's HDR.
Fair enough. Schy? You got to unmute.
It's like the box of 64 crayons versus the box of 3.
Well, I'm not sure that...
and to the point of nits is a measurement of, and help me, Stuart, nits is a measurement of what? That is, and Courtney.
The light or the brightness of the output of the monitor you're displaying it on, which is why HDR for camera and HDR for monitors really should be completely different things.
So H or H, whichever continent you live on, is high, and it's dynamic, which means things that are variable, and range means, so you've got a lot of pixels. And to me, what I saw was it's the closest thing to 3D visually in a two-dimensional screen. Oh, well, Stuart,
nope.
It's again an emotional experience.
There's a lot of complexity.
Can be sharpness and how much the talent stands out from the background, which is actually the aperture of the lens and what have you. That's more a matter of like whether you're shooting on the Micro Four Thirds cameras some of us are using, or if you're shooting on a medium format camera, which is a larger sensor than full frame, which is a larger sensor than Super 35.
Bruce, do you want to get into the mess of this?
Stands out.
Yeah, okay, so I don't really understand totally the concept, but what I've seen with HDR does is it gives you that photographic look. You know how sometimes when you take a video camera and you point it into a light source, it blows out your image. But with HDR, you can actually contrast that so you don't get as much blown out behind you, and you can control that more.
There you go.
Yeah, my understanding of it kind of falls down to this, and I'll try to simplify it, and I'll probably get some things wrong. But generally, in the old days, when we looked at the luminance values on a vector scope, it pretty much went from 0. There was a little room below that for super blacks, but from 0 to 100 IRE, and those were international units that determined brightness within that range. As HDR came in, suddenly that top went from it's clamped at 100, you may go a little over, but that's illegal, so you can't broadcast it. They opened up this gigantic new range. And when I first heard about it, when they were talking about Rec 2020 and some of these new standards that were flooding out towards us at NBA, they said that the new possibility is going to be enough data to go from 0 to 10,000 in terms of brightness level units. And that was hard to wrap my head around at first. And then as we starting to get the actual rollout, that may have been a theoretical limit, but most people are talking about expanding from 1 to 100 to 1 to 1,000, maybe 1 to 2,000, maybe 1 to 4,000 in terms of the range of brightness levels that you can encode and reproduce. Now, this is a chain, so you've got to have something that's going to capture it. Then you have to have something where you can record it and work with it in editing. And the final step, of course, is somebody has to watch that on a device. And I think that's one of the things that Alex has been talking about, of being so excited about these new Dolby initiatives that we're all going to start learning about, is that there appears to be coalescing a robust pipeline for working in dynamic ranges that are expanded beyond what we've been used to working with. And that's going to give us a lot more capabilities. I remember it thinking about what happened when I learned to use Camera Raw. And in Camera Raw, you used to have to expose the highlights and the darkest part of your picture, and you could lose part of them. If your midtones where the people were, you needed to raise them up, you could lose highlights because there wasn't enough dynamic range up there to maintain subtle gradations in the light, and your clouds in your sky would blow out and just become a big solid white thing. On the other hand, if you exposed well for the clouds, everything in the foreground would become really dark. Well, with high dynamic range, you should have enough move to recover these parts of your picture and make the picture, because of that, much more vibrant, alive, and engaging. And I think that's what everybody is kind of heading towards with this new high dynamic range world. It has a lot of technical stuff to it, but that's kind of the functional basis of it, is you'll get in these new devices the ability to get far more lifelike pictures that encode far more image information than we've ever had before. Jeffrey, you want to take add-ons?
Yeah, and I'm going to add to that by saying this is the reason why we're going to be loving our new iPhones with the LiDAR technology, because you're going from a full frame, a picture, turning HDR to a pixel ability to do your HDR adjustments too, and that's what's going to be really exciting about this. So I think in the next year we're gonna start doing things in a more micro scale when it comes to really tuning and adjusting our photos and videos.
I know all of us who are creators are kind of excited about this possibility of being able to get better shots, lose less, make fewer mistakes, because we have more dynamic range to work with. Schy, and then Courtney. Go ahead, Schy.
Well, when I saw Sony selling 4K because they'd already reached market saturation with 2K and HD, that's when I realized that what HDR, as working in a coloring facility in Burbank, it was the understanding of better pixels, not more pixels. And that's why it's the depth versus 4K, 8K, 12K. Thank you, Blackmagic.
Yeah, so it's not more of the same, it's better versions of the raster that you already have that does more for you. Courtney, and then Stuart.
Yeah, it is kind of a can of worms, because there's HDR that has to do with monitors, and there's HDR that has to do with your gamut of your camera. And here's what it looks like in some of the information on Wikipedia. So you can see it says display HDR at the top there, and then you've got HDR10 and 10 plus. Then you've got Dolby Vision, hybrid log gamma. So you can see it's just a whole. There's lots and lots of math and lots of charts and lots of variables. So you need to determine, it's not just, okay, turn on the HDR. Okay, there it is.
Yeah. This reminds me a little bit about when I went to school and I was studying for my first FCC broadcast license, and you're going, this is pretty technical, but after a while it becomes second nature and everybody starts speaking the same language, but we're at the very crux of something brand new. And I don't think, I think everybody's kind of, I got to get my head around this stuff. It's going to be where we're going. Stuart?
Just one tip for those of you who are using Panasonic cameras. If you delve deeply into your user manual, not the manual that tells you how to get the thing running, but the actual thick manual, the one that's over 1,000 pages long on some of them, you will find that you can actually adjust the shadow and highlight curves independently in those cameras. So you can actually eke out more shadow detail without losing the highlight detail that Bill was talking about before. So a lot of the DSLR manufacturers just will shift and you either save highlights or you save the shadows, but the Panasonic will let you put an S curve in to adjust both.
Mike, do it very fast. I haven't been looking at my clock, and I should have, because we're way behind on questions. I do think this is incredibly important, and this is kind of where a lot of these devices are going. I know Alex has talked about how the new iPhones and some of these new editorial things are going to change. So we have to get into this, and so I think it's really important to talk about. But we do have a lot of questions here. So Mike, real quick, and then we're going to move on. Blast through these questions real fast.
All right, thanks, Dave. Bill, I'll be real quick. So I actually have the new 12, and guys may or may not be able to see it. I can't see it. So on the very bottom, it says Smart HDR, and it allows you to turn it on and off, which I believe is a new feature, or that might be a new feature in the current OS. But I've been playing with the camera. I like it so far.
Cool. Okay, so you're the first person I've known who's actually got one in their hand, so I'm glad that you're starting out there. All right, we're going to run through these. So real quick answers, everybody, as we try to get up toward the top of the hour. We don't really have, though, a second hour question, do we? So we can just keep going on questions for a while. We start right now with Doug Ferguson of Fort Wayne, Indiana. F1 Jeff came to town, and we have some stories to tell. What happens when your primary and secondary transmission paths fail? We can tell you. Doug, do you want to pop in on this, or do you want to hold?
Yeah, our own 1F Jeff.
That's what I would. Okay, sorry, I didn't get the idiom.
Jeff Keithley. I don't know if some of you know, he's the one who actually built our production trailer. So because I had a football game to stream and then part of the wedding, I needed to be at the dress rehearsal. I asked Jeff to help me out. So he came up all the way from Texas, and he brought one of his coworkers. And so we set up Friday during the day, and it was terrible, terrible weather. But I left the venue at about like 4 o'clock to go to the rehearsal. And I was actually at the dress rehearsal monitoring the stream, and the internet went down. And then we have a cellular backup, and that didn't work. So we were recording it, and the worst case scenario that we ended up doing is just, I took the recorded version and uploaded it to YouTube, but it was just pretty bad that the first and secondary internet went down for us. But the weather was, I think, what caused it. And there wasn't much we could do. I was drenched during setup because it came in hard, and I was running to cameras trying to cover them up. It wasn't a fun production that day.
That the show must go on thing comes into play. Jeffrey Powers and then Courtney.
It's called force majeure. I don't know how to pronounce it right, but it's actually in any of my contracts for sure. It means that if all fails and everything has been tried to keep things going and it just doesn't work, we will do our best to make it still happen. But there's no guarantees, and yeah, that's tough. So, Doug, are you asking what to do with this? Is there a triary type solution? Is that what you're asking?
No, I just wanted to share the story of what we did. But yeah, I mean, I know that Alex is in the past, their big shows, they actually have 4 transmission paths. But we're talking high school football. I thought primary and secondary would be good, but apparently not. So yeah, it's all trial and error. And just like Guy Cochran says, you got to take the arrows in the back sometimes to figure out what to do next. And, even in the planning that we do, that we all do, in our world, as we know, things happen, and we are all good troubleshooters, and I think that in this world, troubleshooting is a big key to what we do, in whether you're audio, video, IT, and the crazy thing is that we all have to kind of be experts in all those areas. But it's been great to be part of this group, because this, you can bounce stuff off each other and learn. And I'm here to share our experiences as well. And so, but overall, I mean, I ended the weekend with the wedding thing, and that went off great. And yeah, my eyes are still puffy from not getting a lot of sleep, but yeah.
We've all been there. Courtney, you have a comment?
Yeah, well, not a comment. I have a question for Doug. Well, when you talk, because I don't know that much about your IT and setting up a multi source and a backup, is there a single point of failure that can knock out both of those? And how is that arranged? And who are you using? And how are you setting up your two separate sources for internet connection? Is one of them, over fiber optic? Is one of them over LTE? What is your backup? Can you go a little bit more into what were the two and how they both failed at the same time?
Sure. So at this particular venue, the press box is getting internet from the school via a point-to-point wireless connection. I'm not sure the brand that they're using. And during the
microwave data connection, then.
Right, during the day when we did our speed test, we were getting 60 down and 40 up. So we're like, hey, this is great. So we definitely did like a 20-minute stream test during the day. So that was fine. Our backup is a MoFi router, LTE. It just has one SIM card. So right now it's a T-Mobile SIM card. I don't have a live view that has the bonded, but the sad thing is I had emailed the IT people, the company that works for the school, and I did not get a reply back. And so as I was explaining this after the game to the AD, he was more upset at them than anything. Like, he knew that we had done our due diligence in trying to, because I wanted a hard line to the school. I was going to run fiber directly to the school. And even this morning I emailed him the email chain that, yeah, they did not respond to us for that. But yeah.
That shows you the power of documentation. If there's money on the line and you've got contracts and you're supposed to show up, the more you can document, even if it's just saving all your email chains, does help a lot, just so that you've got a clear path to that. John Preto?
Doug, your tertiary path was supposed to be to the booze tent at the wedding.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. I think it's time to move on to the next question.
Actually, I gotta bounce, but Skype, if you can make Bill co-host, that way, if there's any, so we have our failover set up properly.
Thank you for paying attention to that, Jeffrey.
Yeah.
Have
you guys have a good day.
Yeah, a good rest of the day.
Jeffrey, wait, before you bounce, there's so many buttons. One moment. Participants,
you should be able to make
you go to panelists. Go to the panelists and you'll see Bill there, and then you just go to the more, and then promote co-host.
Make co-host.
There you go.
There you go. Perfect.
Make co-host Bill Davis and hitting.
So he's figuring that out. I've got one question. Does line of sight decrease at nighttime because you can't see as far?
What?
It does decrease if there's rain, though. I'll tell you.
I wonder if infrared increases. Because it gets cooler. Anyway,
back to Bill.
Alex Alegnowitz, and I may be butchering your name, and if so, I truly apologize, from Toronto, says, someone may have asked this already, is Mukana available commercially, or is it here, or is there anything similar? And Alex has answered that a number of times. It is not at this point. It's still in development. He has said more than once that on his long-term plan as a possibility, but we have no confirmation of that. And right now, it is a proprietary thing, but keep your fingers crossed. A lot of people have been asking about it. Kev Brewer from Nottingham, UK, and here in the panel often, although I don't see him today, says, does the panel have any tech recommendations or other advice for students and or other users who have hearing impairments and have to use Zoom or other video conferencing systems? Any other useful accessibility tools and tips? Schy, go ahead.
I thought I was understanding that YouTube now does transcription live. Is this not a thing? Is that a opportunity?
There are websites I know that we have talked about that will do transcriptions live, and that you could bring in a screen scrape of part of how they work. Jeff, do you know more about that?
Web Captioner, and the other one is Otter, and I'll put some links. Otter has an API for Zoom, and it's a paid service, and Web Captioner, I believe, is free.
Yeah. I tell you, one of the things that just because we use these little IFB in-ear things for me, and this is obviously going to depend on the nature and level of hearing impairment and things like that. If you have hearing enhancers, you probably have already learned how to use them in conjunction with headphones and things like that. But if it's a modest impairment, this makes things so much clearer to me to have moved it off of the speakers in the room interruption thing to a direct driver that's near, well controlled, so it's not going to hurt my hearing, and that gives me some extra control over that. It's been a boon to me. Courtney, and then Jeff. Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, a lot of people in public, if they have monitors up that they're monitoring something in a public place, they want to have the sound turned down, so they use closed captioning so people can look at the monitor and see what's going on and follow along. So it's used for that beyond the hearing impaired.
Jeff.
Also, what's really important for those who are partially hearing impaired, but also for these captioning systems, is very good quality audio coming into it. That's not on the student's end, that's on the teacher's end. So you need to I've seen some really poor teacher audio, and so it's a matter of reaching out to them, and thanks Laura Thompson in the chat, possibly through the disability office in the school, that you can encourage that teacher to improve their audio quality so they get really clear audio that either can be better understood or can be understood by the automatic captioning systems.
Amen to that. I'm working right now.
I have to run. Thanks, everyone.
Oh, bye, Jeff. I'm editing a Zoom screen scrape thing right now, and just the little intermittent dropouts make intelligibility so much more challenging than if I had managed to get them a little local recorder and say, just turn this on before you start it, and then zip it to me on the internet. I would have had far better audio. Mike Burns?
Yeah, so regarding screen captioning, if you're creating content and you want that screen capturing to be done on the fly, Apple actually released an app called Clips that kind of slipped out under the radar, and it was specifically used for social media, Facebook, I think, specifically. So when you're scrolling and you see that text going along, that's basically, turning the voice to text, and it does it on the fly while you're shooting a clip. So there's nothing needs to be done. And after the fact, it actually gives you about a dozen different font options and sizes and stuff. So it's pretty cool. Play with it if you guys haven't looked at it.
Excellent. Okay. Paul Wallace is, oh, no, I'm sorry. Guy has a hand up. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, at Zoomtopia, there was a new thing released called a Zap, and I'll show you if I can cut to this screen. Down at the bottom right in Zoom, there's going to be a new thing that says Zaps, and there's going to be Rev transcriptions, which will sorry.
Yeah, we still have your main shot.
Yeah,
Time. The ability to improve accessibility and document what was said.
You're going to see this thing called a Zap.
Zap.
Audio is really hot. Audio is really hot, Guy, on the monitor.
Hey. All right, sorry about that.
Not you. The playback.
The feed from your playback.
It's accurate.
Gotcha. Sorry, let me kill that audio. We don't need that audio anyway. But basically, it's a news app that's been released, and you can see that the transcripts will pop up on the side. So this is something new as of last week, and worth taking a look at. So hopefully that helps, Kev.
And that relates to Paul Wallace. Oh, cool. Go ahead, Joe.
Sorry, is Guy saying news app or new zap? It's an accent thing.
New zap, right?
Yes,
It's a
in
new Zap,
EW.
ZAPP, a Zap. So that's the new thing that was talked about at Zoomtopia that's coming in the newer versions. And this
Can
will
you
be
Okay, so
describe-
it
that
look like
rides on top.
a news feed or social feed?
So it pops along the right side as captions.
So it's a pop-out
In real time.
panel, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Guy,
and
Guy,
actually, the next
Guy,
question
please
from
describe
Paul.
what a zap is. What a zap is, please.
So basically, Zoom is a platform, and they're allowing third parties now via the SDK to come in and write specialized apps, and they could make things look totally different, but still utilizing the participants, utilizing the video, so they can make Zaps that are totally a different look and feel. Like there's a new classroom Zap that teachers are going to love, but basically it doesn't look like regular Zoom anymore. You can make the kids look like they're virtually at desks. There's lots of little things, but there's tons of Zaps. If you look on the Zoom website, you can see what people are coming out with because they've been working on this stuff behind the scenes.
So it's a user accessible extension world for Zoom.
Exactly.
Okay. And Paul Wallace says, okay, game, Zoom 5.0 is here. Should we all upgrade? I didn't know that they pushed a new version.
5.4.
5.4. Okay. So is everybody happy with it? Paul's asking basically if he should upgrade. Does anybody have any good or bad early
I would say
reports?
definitely upgrade. There's a lot of new features in there, a lot of new toys if you like those filters, a lot of new filters. But there's a lot of more accessibility and new features. So definitely upgrade. There's no reason not to upgrade, really.
Okay.
So Mike didn't need to get a hat. He could actually wear a virtual hat today.
Well, there you go. The next one is TJ asking, can Vipul discuss his work? But we dealt with that earlier, so I'm going to get that moved over. And Vipul and others will come back and talk about that whole thing because I know everybody wants to see the results of their big thing. Audio chain and sync. This is from Hasmuk from the panel. Normally, I think Hasmuk's gone as well. Audio chain and sync. Oh, well, no, you were there. I'm sorry. You were in the corner. They've shifted around for me. If HDMI camera into ATEM and audio through MixPre with ATEM and MixPre connected to a computer, I guess that's their audio chain and sync. Will there always be a sync issue? Should audio out of the MixPre be rather piped into the ATEM? Will there then be any sync issues? And from my remembrances of the early days, that if you can run audio through the camera, that is the quickest and easiest way to avoid any sync issues. In other words, audio from however you're generating it, microphone, MixPre, whatever, to the camera, if you're using a Blackmagic or something like that with audio in, and then take that HDMI from the camera, the camera will synchronize and make sure everything is together before it sends it out. But there may be other pathways that require some delays being added in the process. You want to amplify, Hasmuk?
Yeah, I try to use the iPhone as a HDMI camera. So then that's a bit of a challenge in terms of the audio.
Okay, Stuart and Courtney both have suggestions for you. Stuart, go ahead, and then Courtney right after.
Can any of the retailers who may be Blackmagic distributors in the panel provide feedback to Blackmagic that balanced audio input would be appreciated on the ATEM minis?
Yeah, I think that was one of the first things we discussed back in the early days. Feature request. Courtney, for you next.
Right. Because I just dealt with this morning. I used to feed, and I still am feeding the output of my mixer into USB and into Zoom, but today I'm also taking the analog out of my mixer, a little Samson mix pad, which all my microphones going into and other sources are going into. And the output of that is coming into mic 1 in, and then you have to crank down the input level to about minus 50 dB to get the ATEM input, the two mic inputs down to the proper level for line input. And then you have the ability within the ATEM software, through the software settings on the switcher controller software that you load in, you can delay up to 10 frames, I believe, with the little knob in there. And so I'm currently delaying 2 frames. And So you can put it back in sync using the delay within the ATEM. Of course, you also have the ability to delay within the mix pre, but then anything else you bring in that is not going through the mix pre will be out of sync. So it might be best to bring whatever you can in through the mixer first, and then the mixer through the ATEM, or anything else through the ATEM, and then adjust the delays within the ATEM. You have that ability now.
So is there any point in taking the stereo out from the mix pre and put it into the mic 1 or mic 2 on the ATEM? That doesn't solve the problem, does it?
Well, it gives you better mic preamps for a high quality mic, like a DPA or whatever you're using there, a pile.
But it doesn't solve the sync problem.
No. Well, the mix pre can delay as well. It can solve the mix. If
I recall, doesn't it have kind of rough steps? It's not a continuous delay. It's kind of like, I don't think you can get very granular.
It's in milliseconds, so you kind of have to gauge it.
Oh, okay.
And instead of
Stuart, let's keep things going.
40 milliseconds frame.
Yeah. Stuart, go ahead.
Yeah, just needed to move the mouse around to the icon to unsync, or to unsync, unmute, whatever.
Unmute.
Just one silly thought crossed my mind while we were listening to the workflows, and how we were talking about Tascam and the like audio recorders last week. One of the Tascam devices, the DR700D, actually uses a HDMI cable to loop out audio into a second DR700D, so you can daisy chain the recorders together. I'm wondering, would the ATEM Mini accept that feed as an audio-only input on a HDMI input, and whether that would solve giving people a high-quality multiple input, because it's a 4 balanced input device, and feed the audio in that way through one of the HDMI channels. So spitballing ideas.
Courtney has his hand up, so
I'd have to look at the specs on the. I'm not familiar with. You say it's a Tascam audio recorders?
Yeah, Tascam DR700D. I'll put the link in Meccano. I'll just quickly find it on the Tascam site.
Does it just use an HDMI cable, or does it use an HDMI protocol? It could just be using the cable because it's got balanced connections inside of it.
I believe it's the protocol, because the first of the recorders in any chain is supposed to be hooked to the HDMI output of a camera and to bring timecode to the recorder via the HDMI.
It's Hasmuk's question, so let's pop back to him. He has his hand up for maybe a clarification. Go ahead, Hasmuk.
So I assume the panel's opinion is that if there's a sync issue, if I'm using a HDMI camera into a TEM, then it's best to solve that on the mix pre itself, from managing the sync issue or delay issue.
Guy is saying kind of no.
No, because if you're doing another HDMI source in, you're going to use the delay that's built in. Actually, no. Sorry, you're right, because the delay is only on mic 1 and mic 2 that you have control. That's the only spot for the delay. So I don't use the ATEM Mini's audio if I have the mix pre, unless I need the AFV, to audio follows video. If you need that, then you're going to have to pipe in via the analog input, which you're going to take a hit, just a slight hit, and then you got to deal with some level issues. But that's a challenge.
I always feel very lucky because I just use this ZoomTac 2, and it's a Thunderbolt 2 audio interface that my mic plugs into. That plugs into the MacBook Pro, which is new, and I've never had a sync offset in what I send out. So I do think that if your audio gear tends to be using the higher end chips and you're not using relatively inexpensive things, you can sometimes not have to worry about these. So I just don't want to get everybody who's listening in the general audience the idea that you're always going to face audio delays and you've got to spend a ton of money and throw it at. Definitely try what you're using and see, maybe you'll get lucky and you don't have these delays. When you do, the hours we've spent trying to diagnose and fix them are very important, when that's kind of why office hours exists. But
you're about 2 frames out of sync, Bill, right now.
Thank you. Mike Burns, go ahead.
So super quick, when this whole thing first started, I actually was trying some of the NDI software to use my like half dozen iPhones that I have in this office. Has that software gotten any better as far regarding sync? Because sync was a real nightmare, and that was the thing that really turned me off to it.
Yeah, I remember we talked a lot in those early days about how these paths of virtualizing circuits were adding a good bit of delay. I don't use either of those. I don't use OBS or NDI or any of those things, so I don't usually have to learn how to fix it. So I guess not. So we've still got a good number of questions up here. So let's keep things going. Stuart has the next one, actually listening to Doug's tale and wondering, can anyone recommend a digital downlink for a drone to do live output to vMix or OBS, or is it easier to use the phone method from DJI devices? Anybody a drone pilot here who does a lot of this and want to weigh in on it, or are we Guy, go ahead.
The only one that I know of, and I'm not totally well versed in this, but is the DJI Crystal Schy. It's the upgraded monitor remote that you can get from them directly. I believe there's a 7-inch, and that has the HDMI out. When I was researching it, that was the only way to go, but it's been about a year since I've done a bunch of research on that.
But they have another one called Lightbridge too, right? That has
Lightbridge was the Phantom 2. It's well out of date. And Crystal Schy probably costs about as much as a good drone just by itself. The DJI FPV goggles, if you get the second remote controller, you can actually do an output via its HDMI after a firmware patch, but there doesn't seem to be any direct way of doing it beyond doing a screen capture on your phone and taking it out through the USB port.
All right, fair enough. Moving on. Jonas Dattel from Reutlingen. What do you think of the new Shure mic that was just released with XLR out and USB out? I think it's a sign of the times that they want to sell into both channels, so to speak. And wouldn't be surprised if we see a lot of those older company. And there's nothing wrong with old. I mean, Shure is a respected brand and has been for 100 years. And there are plenty of others who have been traditionally in the XLR balanced audio mic out industry who probably can see the writing on the wall, which is that all these vidcasters and other people that are flooding into the market want better sound, but they don't understand or don't want to, or not configured for XLR balanced audio, but they want something better than a little mini pug. So the moving them into a USB chipset that will connect direct to a computer makes a lot of sense to me. Guy is showing, is that what it looks like? It looks like a
I
good
just
old
wanted to pull up the image. I don't know anything about this mic, but I just wanted to pull it up and take a look at it.
Yeah, it's interesting. The MV7. So it's the 7B form factor in a both XLR and USB. It'd be interesting to hear what it sounds like. I've never.
Paul's got an ATR that's got USB and XLR on it. It's had it for years, and it's only $100, right, Paul?
Correct, John. You are correct. It's the ATR 2100, and it's highly recommended. I'm not using it right now, but I have one around here somewhere. Oh, here it is.
I think you need to buy 3 of these new Shures that just came out there, Paul.
I think the question is, which mic do you not have, Paul? That's the real question.
I would wager that everyone on this panel has more mics than I do.
Yeah, but we don't use them every day.
We don't have them appearing in our picture every day.
John Preto lives in Vegas. He'll take that bet.
That's right. Okay, moving on. Schy, the next question is for Schy, and the question comes, he has a link there. The show I produce Saturday, Mad in the Kitchen. I'd like to give a huge thank you to Bruce Himmelblau for his help as TD and behind the scenes support. So it is a public, great. This is exciting. That's part of the big function here is we've all met people, and I think I've seen a lot of circumstances where people who come on the panel and demonstrate expertise, people go, hey, I need you. And the next thing you know, there's a connection and people are working with other people, which is
do you hear that, Hasmukh? I need you. I need you. You, Madeline, and your wife are going to be cooking, and your wife's going to teach Madeline something. I think.
And Schy actually had the next question is too, using mobile phones as a live streaming camera, how can I isolate an individual to capture each separate video source? He has his hands up. Bruce has some thoughts.
We wanted to do things in post, but we were realizing on a phone, you can't capture and stream least we haven't figured it out on an iPhone and or a Pixel, which is the two sources that we're using, other than the Blackmagic and the GH5 or 4 that I was using. So, Bruce.
I've been giving this a lot of thought too. So there might be a way, because by going into that feature of record your screen on the iPhone, that might be a possibility. But I think it may only just record video. I don't think it records audio. But then you don't really need audio because you've got audio somewhere else.
I've had problems with that. And for those of you who don't know, you can, on an iPhone particularly, you can set it up so that there's a button on your, is it upper left corner swipe? No, upper right corner swipe down to get into things. You punch that and it'll start recording the screen. When I'm watching content, copyrighted material, it never records audio for me. But if I'm shooting something, I have had it record audio. So I do think that may be tied together with its rights management world. Let's do Mike Burns and then Stuart. Go ahead, Mike.
Sorry. Okay. Yeah. So the screen recording thing, it absolutely does. It will bugger you up if there's any copyright issues. But I found, ironically, it allows you to record YouTube streams, because sometimes I've had to, on the fly, grab sound effects or something like that, and I'll literally just open up in YouTube and run screen recording, and now I have them. So it's just your mileage may vary. Just it all depends on what the platform is.
Yeah, but Schy's talking about doing it as an ISO. So you want to record what he's seeing.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Yeah. Well, I was just go ahead.
And on StreamYard, it actually will also hold a recording for us up there as well of the line cut. What I'm looking for is each individual camera, and video is fine. All I really need, because I'm capturing audio separately, so I can do and clean up something in post and fix over the reason you capture ISOs to begin with.
Don't forget that Filmic Pro does do a clean aperture capture to your phone, so that's something to explore. So that'll get rid of some of the general mushy stuff around and menus and things. Courtney and then Stuart.
If I don't know how it works on an iPhone, if you have a Lightning to HDMI out, or on the Pixel, if it can give you an HDMI out while you're streaming. I don't know if that's possible. You could just use an outboard MPEG-4 recorder that takes HDMI in and run a separate recorder on the USB stick there.
There is a gizmo for the Pixel that will bring you Ethernet and power, and it's a little $35 plug. So
yeah, I use on my iPhone.
HDMI out.
Yeah. On my little iPhone here, it's an iPhone 10. I have just a standard Apple adapter that gets HDMI out and takes power in, so it'll run through a whole show like this. It's 3 or 4 hours without running the phone down. I think those are commonly available.
You can stream at the same time you have that plugged in, though, right?
What? You can what?
You can stream at the same time you have that plugged in, right?
Yeah, when I punch up this as my source, that's just the front page of my phone. So it just comes in as a regular into the ATEM Mini as a regular HDMI stream with that dongle. Stuart,
but I thought the question was if he's streaming from the phone over Wi-Fi to the internet.
I didn't see the Wi-Fi part of that. It's just using mobile phones as a live streaming. Yeah, maybe not. Stuart, can you clarify?
2 apps on Android. One is called Larix Broadcaster, which is supposed to do SRT and what have you, but I haven't been able to get my head around getting its port forwarding to work. But if you're talking about streaming from a device as the camera source within a network, RTSP Camera Server, and I'll send a link to you via Discord, Schy. That one allows you to just be able to use the device as the camera, and you're recording on the device as well as the RTP stream.
That's what I want to do, what he said.
Okay.
Cool. I will find
Guy is shaking his head.
in the Play Store and then post
No, because you're running StreamYard, so StreamYard's already doing the connection. He doesn't need to do any RTMP stuff because that's being handled by StreamYard. So the question is, are you going to have a dirty feed if you're looking at the screen and you send it out HDMI? Is it going to have gunk on, the on-screen display stuff? So there's a couple options. I mean,
yeah. So
you might wanna
another
even
real
look at-
obvious problem with that also, when you're doing the feed out, is you're still going to get the little red record dot on the bottom and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, it's
So,
that screen thing. And I think, Guy,
Yeah.
did you want to finish up your thought? Is that the thing where
Yeah, but-
Filmic Pro or something like that
I
gives you a
haven't-
better aperture would help?
Well, if they're using a remote camera as part of StreamYard, then you're kind of hosed because there isn't a way to ISO that unless you take the HDMI out, and you're going to get the on-screen display. So maybe an A10 Mini with an Apple TV and taking the HDMI out there and doing a ISO recording on an A10 Mini ISO. That's one way to do it.
That's what I was thinking. Take your phones and HDMI them into an A10 Mini ISO and then record those individual streams and then take the output of that and use that as your live stream, maybe. That's it. It seems like complex, but that seems like it should work. All right, let's keep moving along here. Mike Burns from Spokane says, I bought new Beats Flex earpods, willing to share thoughts. So Mike, do you want to talk to us about how that has worked for you?
Yeah. So, yeah, this actually came up last week. Someone was asking about them, and I said, I'm buying them. I'm going to give you a review, and even got them to match my hat, which fixed my hair, but that's a different story. I like them. I have to tell you, for $50, I worked down at Apple for many years. I'm stunned that they actually sell a wireless, earphone for, less than $100. And I have to say, the sound quality is very good. Maybe a little more bassy than I want it to be normally.
That's kind of the Beats thing, is every time I put a set of Beats in, it's like, oh, thump, thump.
Yeah, exactly. So like if you're going to compare them to the AirPods Pro, they're still very kind of bulky and whatnot. But if you're just walking around the house and you're listening to an audio cast, or you're doing something like this, which it's perfect for, because that low end with that bass frequencies really works nicely when you listen to a podcast or listening to something like this with a couple, bunch of talking folks like ourselves.
Excellent. Thank you
So
for the
I like
review.
them. And $50.
Yeah,
That's to me, that's insane for Apple. So I'm glad they're going that direction.
Good. Courtney, you wanted to pop in on that?
I was just going to ask him what the battery life is like, and at least you won't lose one of them.
Yes. So Courtney, it's 12 hours. It's what's rated for in a full charge.
Okay. Moving on, Rick Combs of Columbia, Tennessee. I'm using a Mukana Mobile. I do not see the option to listen anymore. Has that been disabled? I don't think so. I haven't been on it in a while, but is anybody using the Mukana Guy?
I think Mickey is normally the one that handles it, and since he's out, I think it's.
Fair enough. That's undoubtedly what's going on.
I don't see it in I run mobile alongside my screen, and I don't see the icon up there now.
Okay, fair enough. Ruben Marchena of Grand Rapids, Michigan said, I had to do a thing with streaming my sister's funeral, and because I had issues with a speaker PowerPoint, the previous week, I converted the slides into a movie to avoid issues on this important event. What kind of equipment do I need to combine PC and Mac slides? First of all, I think you were wise.
Stuart, your mic is open.
I think you were wise to not try to run the PowerPoint and in a sensitive circumstance like that where you want it to work. Recording out something and playing back that recording is always, to me, safer choice than trying to get something that's running on the computer to be flawless so that you don't have breakdowns and crashes. But that said, does anybody have any? Courtney is holding a device.
Well, and I'm also curious as to what she means by combine PC and Mac. I use this, I have it unplugged right now, but I plug this into my A10 Mini, and this is an entire Windows 10 PC with Wi-Fi. And it has the little dongle there is for my keyboard, and it has HDMI out, and it'll run a full version of Windows, so you can run PowerPoint on it, you can run Zoom on it, and get an extra input into, you could feed this in with a capture card like a Elgato or something. You could feed this into the Mac as a PC source, feeding into the Mac if you're going to use the Mac as your primary display device.
As I reread this, I wonder if she's talking about that circumstance where, people are coming up to present and somebody brings up a PC and somebody brings up a Mac, and the PowerPoint that they are trying to run on the PC in a circumstance where the projector or whatever isn't necessarily expecting that, you have trouble with that. I mean, we used to see that a lot in any kind of presentation thing. I used to do a lot of participation and helping run things at like NAB and stuff like that. And
well, a good solution to that would be what a lot of us are using here is an ATEM Mini, because the ATEM Mini will synchronize and tell each of the two different computers what kind of signal it wants, and then you could have 2 or 3 laptops plugged in and just switch between them on the ATEM Mini.
Yeah, the challenge used to always be is just making sure that you have the correct dongle, because usually there was some sort of dongle that fit that person's computer, whether it was VGA or something, and you had to get to a standard that the projector would see consistently. And I remember I used to travel with like 6 different dongles, depending on what I ran into, with speakers bringing different eras of laptops, and you never knew what output you were going to get. And you had to
Plus the fonts and the aspect ratio.
Font substitution. Yeah, it's a little bit of a black art, but hopefully in talking around that, we managed, and I hope everything went well at your event. Moving on, Mike Burns, our second to the last question, says Casey Neistat, who is a famous YouTube reviewer, reviewed a cool new non-DJI drone. Does anybody have any information? Did anybody pay attention to what's going on there? Just go ahead, Schy.
Yeah, I jumped on that because Casey Neistat I've been following for at least 3 years, and because he is an influencer, but he's also a storyteller, and consequently, I think his point was that this is a made in America situation versus a DJI. That is, he brought that factor into his review. And since he's moved to Southern California, he's now flying not just in New York like he used to. But he talked about its features, and it is on YouTube, and it is a healthy review of an American-made.
Any brand name that American-made? Because non-DJI drone covers about 5,000 different products. So.
Good point. Yeah.
I will find the link and post it in Mokana.
Okay. And which
I'm
is
sorry.
Plug.
It's actually on the video for the artificial intelligence drone. It won't stop following me. Skydio, SKYDIO.com.
All one word, upper and lower. Is there a dash in there, or is it just SKYDIO?
This was just a website, and it was just all lowercase.
Okay. All right. Well, good.
And super quick, the some of the bonus features of that is the way it followed him. It's like the AI, once it locked on him, like he could not lose it, and that was scary. And that was like part of his whole thing.
He was in the woods, and this thing was
through the trees. Collision avoidance, so it looked up, down, left, right, forward, backwards.
If they've gotten haircut identification up with fingerprint identification, that would be scary, because isn't that what you'd try to?
Yeah,
that's bizarre.
No, he was in the woods, and he was actively hiding behind trees, and it was finding him, and that was like freaky.
Oh, that is weird. Paul?
Yeah, I remember watching a YouTube video with Supercar Blondie. She reviews these high-end like Maseratis and Rolls Royces, but there was actually a car built that had built-in drones, and she was driving it. It was like a backwoods car, SUV type, and the drones just released, and then they hovered up above. I think it was 2, might have been 4, but they hovered above and tracked her and followed this SUV wherever she went. Pretty amazing.
There's a traffic jam coming. Deploy the drones. That would be interesting. Well, I think that takes us through. The last thing is Mike Burns with a link to the topic we were just discussing, but I think we've gotten to the end of the list for today. So there's nothing left except to say a tremendous thank everybody for showing up and doing another office hours. Alex, as you know, is working heavily, and who knows, we will all be here regardless. We are here every morning. I think even the day of his big show, which is coming up on Thursday of this week, I think we're all going to gather at least for a short period of time with the expectation that I'm not sure if it'll be a watch party or just everybody go watch the keynote, but he seems pretty excited about that. And we all know that Alex is deeply involved in the leading edge of technology. And every time he said something is coming, it might be a big thing. It's something I pay attention to. Stuart, go ahead and do you have a last thought before we close the show?
Do we have a link? Do we have a link for that event?
Not yet. And Alex said he is going to post one. So just, I'm sure in the next couple of days, he will get that sent out. I'm pretty sure he's buried in just the 1,000 details. I mean, most of us have been involved in the show crews before, and you know that 3 or 4 days before a show is one of your highest, I got to get these things done, punch list circumstances. Courtney, are you just resting your arm, or do you have a last thought?
I was just going to make a comment on the story about the car with the drones in it. I used to work I worked a little bit on a TV show called Viper, if you remember that.
I remember that. Yeah.
Viper, and it had a drone that it would launch out of the back. It was totally fake. We used actually a remote controlled helicopter to get the POVs for that. But that was before all the quadcopters were out. But yeah, so it existed in a TV show long before it existed in reality.
I want to get to the point where you can send the drone to Starbucks to retrieve a cup of coffee while you're driving, or
no.
favorite coffee shop.
Starbucks is already working on sending that to you. That it's already been, it's in the works.
Yeah,
that car, by the way, was the AI Trail from Audi, and it has 5 built-in drones. Amazing car.
AI Trail, is it an SUV from Audi? That would be interesting. I just said that because of the trail designation, but who knows? Listen, we're just circling the rain here at the end of the show. So thank you all for being here this morning. I truly appreciate everybody sticking with us this late in the day. We'll be back tomorrow morning, same time, same circumstance. Whoever has the con, and I think it's Schy. Is it you, Schy?
Yes, it is.
So when you hit the leave, everybody leaves. You're totally in control of that.
The end button. Am I
the end button for you is global end. It's
okay, and that'll shut off the YouTube as well.
No, I think Alex. I don't know. Alex may have to do that, but I know all that I have ever done at the end of this show is just hit the
3,
end program.
2.
Bye, everybody.